Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into food allergies.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, specifically discussing them in English.
Yeah.
Whether it's for yourself or for helping someone else being able to clearly communicate about allergies, it can make all the difference.
Right. It can literally, it's not just about politeness or anything. It's about preventing some serious health risks.
Exactly. Exactly. And so we've got a whole stack of sources here today. We've got articles, medical guides, even some personal stories that we're going to be looking at.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm already seeing some pretty fascinating things pop out.
Okay.
Did you know that miscommunication is actually a leading cause of accidental allergen exposure?
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a little alarming, isn't it?
It is. It is kind of scary.
Yeah. It really highlights why mastering the language is so crucial.
Right.
It's not just about knowing the right words, but using them in a way that ensures clarity and minimizes those risks and, helps you feel confident in any situation.
Right. Confidence is key. So let's jump into it.
Okay.
One of the first things our sources highlighted was this key difference between an allergy and an intolerance.
Right.
I think people use those terms interchangeably all the time, but there's a big difference.
Huge, huge difference. An allergy is like a serious immune response to a specific food protein.
Okay.
Your body sees the allergen as like a threat, and it triggers a cascade of reactions, and those reactions can be mild like hives, or they can be life-threatening like anaphylaxis.
Oh, wow.
And intolerance, on the other hand, is more about difficulty digesting a certain food. It might cause, some discomfort, but it's not an immune response, and it's not usually life-threatening.
So it's like being lactose intolerant means you might have an upset stomach from dairy, but it's not the same as a severe milk allergy.
Right.
That could trigger anaphylaxis.
Yeah, and understanding that difference is important because it informs how you communicate your needs.
Oh, okay.
You'll want to be clear about the severity of your allergy and the potential consequences of accidentally being exposed.
Right. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So now let's say we're looking at an ingredient list.
Okay.
How do we navigate that? Because I feel like ingredient lists can be a minefield, especially if you're not 100% fluent in English yet.
They can be really tricky. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But there are some key things to look out for. So first, become familiar with the different ways allergens are listed.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll be clearly stated contains peanuts.
Right.
But other times they'll use phrases like may contain or processed in a facility that also handles.
So even if it's not directly in there, the chance of cross-contamination?
Exactly.
From shared equipment or something.
Right. And that's where being able to ask those informed questions becomes so important.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to clarify things with the restaurant staff or even call the manufacturer directly if you're unsure.
So you're saying we need to advocate for ourselves?
Yes.
Not be shy about making sure our needs are met.
Exactly. Being proactive and asking those questions shows that you take your health seriously and helps everyone else understand how important it is to take those precautions.
Okay.
It also helps you feel more confident and in control, which is so important when you're dealing with something as potentially stressful as a food allergy.
Okay, I'm already feeling more empowered just from this conversation.
Good.
But before we dive into specific phrases and scenarios, I want to touch on epinephrine.
Oh, yeah.
Because our sources really emphasized how critical it is for anyone with a severe allergy.
It is. It is. Epinephrine is a medication that can quickly reverse the effects of anaphylaxis.
Okay.
So imagine you accidentally eat something that you're allergic to, and you start experiencing a severe reaction. Your throat might swell, making it hard to breathe. You might feel dizzy and weak. In those moments, epinephrine can buy you precious time until you can get medical help.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
It really highlights the importance of always carrying your epinephrine auto-injector, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It should be as much a part of your daily routine as carrying your phone or your keys. You never know when you might need it.
Right, you never know.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the seriousness of allergies, understanding those ingredient lists and the importance of epinephrine.
Right.
But now let's get into how do we actually communicate all of this in English?
Yeah.
I'm thinking real world scenarios.
Yeah, right.
Ordering food at a restaurant.
Yeah.
Attending a social event.
Sure.
Or even just chatting with friends.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
What's interesting is even with a good grasp of the vocabulary, navigating these situations can still be a little tricky.
Oh, yeah.
It's about cultural sensitivity, too.
Right.
What might be considered assertive in one culture could be perceived as rude in another.
Oh, that's a great point. I know some cultures are very direct.
Yeah.
While others are more indirect in how they communicate.
Right.
So how do we kind of strike that balance between being clear about our needs without seeming too demanding.
It's a dance for sure, but there are some phrases and strategies that can really help.
Right.
For example, when you're dining out, one of the first things you can do is inform your server about your allergy.
Right.
And instead of just saying, I'm allergic to shellfish, try something like, I have a shellfish allergy, and it's quite severe, so I'd really appreciate your help in making sure my meal is completely shellfish-free.
Oh, so you're acknowledging their help
Yeah.
and emphasizing the seriousness
Right.
at the same time.
Exactly. And then don't hesitate to ask specific questions about ingredients and preparation methods.
Okay.
You could say something like, can you tell me more about how this dish is prepared? Is it cooked on a separate grill, or is there a chance of cross-contamination with shellfish?
So it's not an accusation, it's like a request for information.
Exactly. You're not challenging their expertise. You're simply seeking reassurance and demonstrating your proactive approach to managing your allergy.
Okay, I like that. But what about social gatherings?
Sure.
Like those potlucks or dinner parties where you don't really have control over the menu?
Yeah.
Those can be a little daunting.
They can be, but there are a couple of approaches you can take.
Okay.
One option is to offer to bring a dish that you know is safe for you to eat.
All right.
This way, you're guaranteed at least one option, and you can also share your delicious, allergy-friendly creation with others.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off.
Yeah. And another option is to communicate with the host in advance.
Okay.
You could say something like, I'm so excited for the party, just wanted to let you know that I have a pretty severe nut allergy. Would it be possible to have a few nut-free options available? I'm happy to provide some suggestions if that would be helpful.
So again, it's about open communication, offering solutions, framing it in a way that's collaborative.
Precisely. And you know what's fascinating is that by taking these steps and being open about your allergy, you often end up educating others and raising awareness, which can have a ripple effect and create a more inclusive environment for everyone.
That's such a powerful point.
Yeah.
It's not just about protecting yourself.
Right.
It's about contributing to like a culture of understanding and accommodation.
Exactly. And, even if there are occasional mishaps or misunderstandings, don't be discouraged.
Okay.
Every experience is an opportunity to learn and refine your communication skills.
Okay, I'm feeling so much more prepared to handle these situations now.
Good.
But let's say, despite our best efforts,
Uh-oh.
a situation arises where we need to explain that we're having a reaction.
Okay.
What are some clear and concise ways to communicate that, especially if we're feeling flustered or panicked?
Yeah, that's a critical scenario to be prepared for. One thing to remember is that in an emergency, clear and simple language is best.
Right.
You might say, I'm having an allergic reaction. I need my epinephrine.
Short to the point.
Yeah,
No room for misinterpretation.
exactly.
Now, what if we need to explain our symptoms
Right.
to someone who might not be familiar with allergic reactions?
That's where having a few key phrases ready can be helpful.
Okay.
Instead of getting overwhelmed trying to describe everything you're feeling, focus on like the most urgent symptoms.
Okay.
You could say, my throat is closing up and I'm having trouble breathing.
Man.
Or I'm feeling dizzy and weak. I think I'm going into anaphylactic shock.
That's really helpful advice.
Yeah.
Having those phrases memorized could really make a difference in those moments.
Yeah, it takes away that pressure of having to think on the spot
Right.
when you're already feeling panicked.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to be assertive. Like if you feel like you're not being taken seriously,
Yes.
repeat yourself.
Yeah.
Raise your voice.
Yeah.
Ask for help from someone nearby.
Right. Your health is paramount, and advocating for yourself is crucial in those situations.
It's interesting how this conversation has kind of evolved from simply learning vocabulary to really understanding like these nuances of communication
Yeah.
and self-advocacy. And I'm curious from your experience, what are some common mistakes or misconceptions that people have when it comes to discussing food allergies in a new language?
That's a great question. I think one common mistake is underestimating the importance of cultural context.
Okay.
What might be considered polite or assertive in one culture might be seen as passive or aggressive in another.
Right.
For example, in some cultures, it's considered rude to refuse food outright, even if you have an allergy.
Oh.
So it's important to be aware of those nuances and find ways to politely decline while still emphasizing the seriousness of your allergy.
So it's almost like learning a whole new set of social rules alongside the language itself.
Exactly. And another common misconception is that it's enough to simply say, I'm allergic.
Right.
Sometimes you need to go a step further and paint a clearer picture of the potential consequences.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, I can't eat peanuts, you might say, Even a tiny amount of peanut can trigger a life-threatening reaction for me.
Oh, so be specific.
Yes, be specific, be assertive, and really drive home that point that this is a serious medical condition.
Right. Not just a preference.
Right. And I think another mistake is relying solely on translation apps or dictionaries.
Yeah.
While those can be helpful tools, they don't always capture the nuances of language and cultural context.
Oh, for sure. I've definitely seen some hilarious translation fails in my time.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that language is so much more than just words. It's about tone, context, understanding those unspoken social cues.
Absolutely. And I think the best way to really master these nuances is through practice immersion and interacting with native speakers.
So basically putting yourself out there,
Yeah,
even if it feels a bit uncomfortable at first.
Embracing those opportunities to practice and make mistakes is where the real learning happens.
Yeah.
And remember, even native English speakers mess up sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's all part of the process.
Okay, I'm loving this conversation. We've covered so much ground. From like essential vocabulary and practical phrases
Yeah.
to navigating those cultural differences
Right.
and advocating for ourselves effectively.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on one final question.
Okay.
We've talked about the importance of clear communication, but what role does empathy play in all of this?
That's such a great question, and it really gets to the heart of what it means to create a more inclusive and understanding environment for people with food allergies. Absolutely. I think empathy is crucial on like both sides of the conversation.
Right.
For those of us with allergies, it's important to remember that not everyone understands, the severity or the potential consequences.
Right.
We might need to patiently explain things multiple times, offer resources or be willing to answer questions.
So it's about meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Understanding that their lack of knowledge might not be coming from a place of malice,
Right.
but just like lack of experience or awareness.
Exactly. And for those who don't have allergies, it's about listening actively. Taking those concerns seriously and being willing to make accommodations.
Right.
It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and imagining how stressful and isolating it can be to, navigate a world that isn't always designed with your needs in mind.
Thinking back to our sources, one story that really stuck with me was about this young woman who had a severe nut allergy and was constantly facing skepticism and disbelief from others.
Right.
She talked about how hurtful it was to have her allergy dismissed as like a fad or a preference.
It's heartbreaking, and it highlights how important it is to, validate those experiences and create spaces where people feel safe and supported.
Right.
When someone tells you they have a food allergy, believe them.
Yeah.
Don't question their experience or minimize their concerns. Instead, ask how you can support them and make them feel comfortable.
That's such a powerful message. It's about shifting that focus from skepticism to understanding.
Yes.
Creating that culture of empathy and inclusion.
Exactly.
And what's interesting is I think this applies not just to food allergies,
Right.
but to so many other aspects of life where people are navigating these invisible challenges.
Absolutely. Whether it's a chronic illness, a disability, or any other condition that might not be outwardly visible.
Yeah.
Empathy is the key to creating a more compassionate and understanding world.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that everyone has their own unique experiences and challenges, and that we all deserve to feel seen, heard, and supported.
I love that it's like a call to action to be more mindful, more curious, and more willing to step outside of our own perspectives.
Yeah.
Embrace the diversity of human experience.
Exactly. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on.
Yeah.
By cultivating empathy, both for ourselves and for others, we can create a world where everyone feels safe, valued, and empowered to live their lives to the fullest.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We've covered so much ground, from the practicalities of language to the importance of empathy and cultural understanding. To our listeners, remember, mastering the language of food allergies is about more than just words.
Right.
It's about advocating for your well-being, fostering understanding, and contributing to a more inclusive world for everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.